Okay, good afternoon all. Welcome to our weekly finance meeting. August 30th, 2023. We're now 1:30 to arrive. So we'll begin our meeting. And certainly always open the floor for public comment at this point. So we have one online, one here. Okay, that moves to item 3, which is the approval of the minutes.
Move to approve the minutes of August 23.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, it brings us to our topic of discussion today, just one on the agenda. That's the county fiscal and growth trends. We have Mr. Stoney and Stoner and Ms. Waters here to talk to us about the growth trends. So, nice presentation. Just turn it over to you.
All right, so quick background on what we're talking about today. We formed a committee to look at growth trends and fiscal trends and the relationship between the two. So I think historically, maybe we've looked at the two separately. How's the county growing from a residential standpoint, from a commercial standpoint? How's the county growing from a fiscal standpoint? What we were lacking was the bridge between the two of those, to show the board what development actually means in terms of our revenue and our taxable assessment, and then also trends of our property valuation indicators. So today we want to summarize our growth trends and then really quantify what that new growth means on our county general fund, and then look at some of our property assessment indicators to make sure that they're valid and also uniform. There's just a quick background of how everything works, of what the county's role is in the entire process. So from my side at the planning office, we see every final land development plan that comes through the county. It's a requirement of the municipality's planning code that they be submitted to the county planning commission for review and comment. After we reviewed and comment on them, send them to the municipality, they approve those developments and then issue building permits. Those building permits then be required to send to Cathy's office at tax assessment, where they monitor the construction progress until it's completed. When it is completed, those improvements are added to our tax assessment rolls, and the new land and building values are added. So you can see the progression there from a plan up to the point where they're added to our tax rolls. So kind of what we're giving you the overview today. So we'll start with development. We have 3 definitions, and the board was here last year, probably recall these from last year, but these really drive our presentation. Proposed development is new development was shown on final subdivision land development plans that were submitted to my office for review. There's been no building permit issued for them. So we see these on a regular basis. This is really the precursor then as they get into the building permits and construction being completed. Pipeline development, second type of development, is when those developments have been proposed, they're received or awaiting a building permit, but construction has not been completed. So these would be in various phases. Some of them may have submitted their paperwork to the municipality. The building permit hasn't been issued just yet, but we are awaiting it. Others will have a building permit on record. That building permit will show us at the county level construction values. So that's what we'll be working on today as we show you values for some of these permits or construction values. They don't include land values. So land values will be added on top of that as those improvements have been made. And then finally, it's completed development. So this is new development, had a building permit, the construction is completed and is now added to the tax rolls. So there are 3 types of development we'll be looking at here in the first part. So proposed development, this goes back to 2022. This is on our county planning department website. If anyone wants to dig a little deeper on any of these projects, and you go in and look at each one of these dots, they represent a subdivision or land development submitted to us for review. If you click on the dot, actually the plan will actually come up, so you can really see what's going on with each plan, what's being proposed. So we dig into the details a little bit. We look at the different types of development that were proposed in 2022. From a residential standpoint, you can see the single family detached was really leading the pack. We also saw a townhome and multifamily development. And then from the commercial and industrial side, there were 57 new units proposed, which was about on average for what we've been seeing over the previous year and the previous 5-year average. So really, if you look at, especially from the residential standpoint, you can see some flip-flopping going on between previous year, where multifamily was really ruling the roost with the number of units proposed versus single family detached for year end 2022. Some notable projects that we saw that were proposed in 2022. See some there, some of the larger projects in South Middleton and also Lower Allen. The big one on the commercial industrial side is the hemp farm. So that's a mixed use project across from the CD High School. 1.9 million square feet. That's about 75% of the total square feet of commercial industrial proposals made in 2022. So it's a very large project. I think it's one that we'll see built out over the series of years. Quick update on 2023 proposed development. Just in the last week, we've received two plans, one for the Grange in Middlesex Township, large residential unit proposal, and then also one in West Pennsboro Township. West Pennsboro, that proposal is 860 units. The Grange is 665. So when you look at the number of units there, 1,400 units just in the past 2 weeks have been proposed. That's a little less than what we'd want to see on an annual basis. There's a lot of development going on, a lot of development proposed future, which I think speaks to the market in Cumberland County, especially under some of the trying times. You see some of the major developers and builders are still pushing projects ahead, despite some of the market factors like higher interest rates and the looming potential recession that's been talked about. So the proposed development, let's look at pipeline development. So we look at pipeline again. This has a building permit assigned to it. There's value assigned to that building permit from a construction standpoint. So we can start to see what the backlog looks like for Cumberland County. We'll see as these projects are constructed, then this is what's going to move into our tax base. But if you look here, we can see that the commercial active building permits right now, we have about 300 million there. Residential, about 203 million. In total, we have $611 million total without, when we say without exempts, we're meaning without proposals for development that are exempt from taxes, churches, schools, whatnot. So we have $611 million worth of projects sitting in our pipeline that'll progress to our tax rolls over the next several years. How long that will take, a variety of factors that influence that, the type of project, the availability of materials, interest rates. There's a lot of market factors that affect how fast these projects will move from this pipeline status to actually being added to our tax rolls. So look at what some of these projects are. We've put some just general descriptions here, but warehousing, obviously, warehousing distribution centers are some of our largest drivers from a land development standpoint and also employment standpoint. One of the earlier slides, we showed that there were a lot of multifamily units being constructed. You can see that there with apartment complexes. Again, some really high construction values for that type of development as well. We are seeing, you see car washes there, convenience stores. A lot of those being proposed right now too. So I'm not sure especially car washes, not sure what the rush is in Cumberland County on car washes, but they're there and you can see $2 million, $2.5 million for a car wash. Okay, so they're decent development. Convenience stores as well. A lot of those have been proposed recently. So again, pipeline development, see the building permits being issued for those. They'll move on to completed development when the construction is completed. So what do we see? This is 2022 and then also year-to-date 2023. See, we have about $278 million worth of total completed development. Again, this is construction value. Land values will be Cathy and her team will put the land values and construction values together to get us that final growth and taxable assessment for these types of developments. You can see a little bit of a flip there that the commercial industrial is a little lower than the residential, but you can see the number of permits on the residential side is really high versus the commercial industrial. So commercial industrial, you see fewer projects, but they're higher value than the residential projects. As I said earlier, some of those other ones that are in the pipeline now, the Grange and then the property at off of Meadowbrook Road in West Pennsboro, they'll generate a significant number of permits and also a likely high construction value that we'll see here in the next couple of years. Some notable projects here. The first two there are in Hampton Township, and they're actually part of the same complex. So you can see when members first build out, they also have the child care center there as well. You can see some of these units coming together as a whole. Southwood is in Southampton Township, and then Mountain View Estates is actually in North Middle Township. Arcona is one that we've seen. That's similar to the Grange and the other project that I mentioned earlier, where you see multiple phases, multiple types of housing build up in a series of years. So there's more to be said about some of these projects like Arcona, like Southwood. These phases will be built out over a series of years. So these were the projects that were completed. So when we get to this point, we looked at a plan was submitted, there was a building permit issued, there was construction that was completed. Now they're added to the tax rolls. And that's where it gets turned over to Cathy's office, where she checks the assessment on the properties, conducts the assessment, and then we can see the growth in taxable assessment. And then from the growth of taxable assessment, that translates into real dollars of general fund tax revenue for the county. So I'll turn it over to Cathy now to cover it from here.
Hello. This slide is showing annual change of taxable assessments. We started in 2018 and went up to year ending as a proposed amount for 2023. Basically, if you're looking at the chart, in 2020, why we went down low was because of COVID. In 2021, we had a high increase, and that was because of Penn State Hospital, which then eventually appealed, and we lowered the assessment. Basically, what you can see from this chart is we're showing 400 million in assessment changes pretty all through those years. From 2018 to 2022, we had a $3.6 million county growth in revenue. And looking at 455 million in taxable assessment, that would be $1 million in tax revenue to the county. So after we have the additions of properties, then we have appeals. Over 5 years, we have 29 appeals and 46 appeals average. Interesting fact, in 2018, that was one development that appealed, and they actually abandoned the assessment. They didn't come in for the appeal, so we had no change in assessments. In 2019, we had an older condominium unit that appealed, and they did have their values changed. September 1 is the deadline to file any appeals, which is Friday. So what drove the increase in the assessment changes from 20 and 22? We showed 2018 up to 22. In 2020, we had a lot of large exemptions going from residential to exemption. And then we also had the beginning of office buildings. They started to appeal. The appeals that were filed in 21 actually were not heard until 22. And that was mostly hotels and a few offices. And again, that was due to COVID. Appeals have reduced the county assessment tax rates by $233 million over the past 5 years. Using the county mill rate, it comes to about $510,000 in taxes, in loss in taxes. So the takeaways on our development, our proposed pipeline. Our pipeline growth is new subdivisions. First, we add the land, Cambria Place, Smith Farms, Hemp Farms, and Arcona. In 2022, we completed 16 new subdivisions. So far in 23, we've completed 8. There's 26 new subdivisions that are not activated as yet. This indicates a strong growth in our forecast. The second is active building permits, both for commercial and residential. Commercial growth is new apartments, car washes, convenience stores, medical offices. And that's showing that the pipeline development is active as well as active building permits. This again indicates a strong growth in forecast. The impact of construction timing may be interest rates. We may see the interest rates raising again, and it may impact the construction timing. Property reuse. So in that section, we can change the use of a building. We may change the building from a school to an apartment, and also a Lowe's changing to a casino. That's what the change of uses are going to show. We may also see some exemptions changing to taxable, which would be a school changing over to an apartment.
I think there's pressures on the planning side too from those flexible property reuses too. So if you look at the Carlisle Pike, the number of vacant buildings, especially vacant retail, and then also vacant office buildings, are they going to continue to sit there in a vacant status? As we've done some outreach for the county comprehensive plan, we see that maybe that's not the case, that there are investors that are interested in taking those properties, reusing it for something else. There's been discussion, could some of those office buildings help address our housing problems that are out there, to reuse those commercial properties for housing? So I think that'll be an interesting trend that we need to track over the future. We'll see those properties are sitting there while they're still in the tax rolls. If they're reused in a meaningful way, we might see additional increases to our tax rolls from the reuse of those properties.
So now we get into the assessment ratios and uniformity, which is CLR, COD, and PRD. We report sales to the State Tax Equalization Board each month. STEB is annually established the common level ratio and assesses assessed values to current market value for each county. They use acceptable techniques, including sales ratio studies. This is a definition of COD, CLR, and PRD. What this chart shows is an indicator of where our common level ratio is at. Right now for 2024 is 80.9. That 80.9 will be used in the appeals for September 1. Our coefficient of dispersion is 15.07. It shows that we're in an acceptable range between 5 and 30. The price related differential is 1.04. We're a little high on that. It's 98 to 103.
Cathy, did you just say that you said the 2024 common level ratio will be used in these tax assessment appeals?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
So let's talk about the takeaways of these three issues, CLR, COD, and PRD. CLR has dropped due to sales versus assessments, meaning the high sales over the last year has lowered our common level ratio. Will it continue? It depends on the sales. Right now, the sales seem to be plateauing. They're still high, but with the interest rates rising, we may start seeing houses take longer to sell. One of the things that we're not seeing is the bidding wars. That's slowing down a little bit as well. Coefficient of dispersion. That's the most commonly used measure of appraisal uniformity. A smaller COD indicates more uniformity assessment. On average, we add about 800 new houses a year. This is showing uniformity that we are keeping consistent with the 2010 values, and we're in the acceptable range. PRD, price-related differential, a statistic used to measure whether high-value properties and low-value properties are assessed at the same ratio to market. As part of our job, we have to validate sales. So all the sales that we do every month, which is about 400, we validate those sales, meaning that we think they're either valid or they're invalid. And we make a decision of that. So we're trending and we're showing each one of the sales that we do. It could be a dollar deed. That's a, that sale would not be used. It could be an estate sale. That would not be used. But we have to pay attention to the neighborhoods and make sure that we're validating the sales right.
Cathy, how's the PRD used then? So you and your staff review those. You identify what sales are valid, what sales are invalid. You're only sending the valid ones to the state, right?
All sales go to the
Okay.
state, but they look at the how we rate them. So if it's a valid sale, we encode it as 00. So they use those 00s. If it's not a valid sale, if the property's been on the market, we have a time on market, and then we can also say other, or we can say that it's an estate sale or a family sale. So they get all the sales. That's how they review them, by looking at what we've done. It's kind of like a double check.
Cathy, what's the definition of a valid sale?
An arm's length transaction, a market approach.
So that designation rests with your office. That designation of arm's length sale, because the impacts of that rests with your office to determine.
So when you look at that, your staff look at that, send them to the state. Your review of that, how does that impact CLR, COD? Does that have any impact if you're doing your job as identifying valid sales? How does that make sure that the CLR and maybe COD are valid?
The state uses everything that we send, and they may kick out high sales and they may kick out low sales, but they use all the information that we send to them to come up with the CLR. It's a complicated equation of how they do the CLR. I've read it. And it is very complicated, but the biggest thing right now is validating a sale doesn't mean that just because somebody pays $600,000 for a house, that's a valid sale. It could be time on market. the property could be on the market 2 days. So then our job is to say, is that a valid sale? The other question is, you may have 14 people bidding on it. The bidding war's going on. So they started out at $400,000 and at the end of the sale, it sold for $550,000. It's our obligation to say, is that a valid sale? So that's what we look at every month. At the end of the month, whenever we do the stub report, then I go over the stub report just to make sure that we didn't validate a dollar, because then that would really kick out into the stub report. The validating of the sales is very, very important. Part of our job.
Cathy, you mentioned about the bidding wars, and you said earlier that the bidding wars are slow. Is that both on commercial and residential?
I don't see as much bidding wars on the commercial sales. It doesn't seem, it seems like they already set the value, and that's what somebody's paying for it. So we don't see a lot of that. We see more of that in the residential sales.
Here we see some stats from the Greater Harrisburg Association of Realtors too on a monthly basis. Some of their stats of the days on market, so you can see the days on market are going up, and also you can see then too the price, the asking price. You know, it's 100% of the asking price. There for a while over the asking price. Now you can see some of those numbers are settling down. So it's taking longer to sell a home, and they're not selling at the premium price of potentially over asking value.
So one other question: the step data that we get, how much lag is there on that? Isn't that usually at least a year once they provide us with?
Yes. We get the step issues, the common level ratio, July 1st of every year.
July 1st. Okay.
That's why we're using the common level ratio now in the appeals for 2024.
But it's the prior year. We
That's
get it
correct.
July, but it's for prior years, no more delay. Say that.
That's correct.
So Cathy, with the CLR, COD, and PRD, if you're looking at it as a professional in this, you're seeing that the values are consistent and they're valid from the data that we have in front of us now?
I am.
Okay.
Next. So this is the overall summary. Growth will continue. New residential subdivisions will continue to add land value first, and that's going to be added to the tax base. Then we're going to be adding the building value. New commercial buildings will also be added to the tax base. Our notable commercial projects are showing new growth, and our active building permits are also showing new growth. We will continue to monitor changing. It's important for us to continue to monitor and track appeals, sales, interest rates, and new residential housing, and also new commercial growth. This will show us new trends for the future. Last, we need to continue to validate and verify sales. This will indicate where next year's indicators will be.
One other takeaway I know I learned as we work on this presentation, aside from getting assessment 101 from Cathy, I learned so much from her working on this presentation. It's amazing the knowledge she has on all these different issues. It takes $455 million of growth in taxable assessment to get $1 million worth of county general fund revenue. So I think that's pretty important when we look at, especially from the planning side, how are we balancing land use, how are we balancing economic development, how are we balancing quality of life. I think it's an important issue because a lot of folks may say, well, you know, the more we develop, the better we're going to see all this revenue in the community. From a county standpoint, granted our millage is much lower than the school district, but from a county standpoint, it takes a lot to generate that $1 million. And that's just, you know, we picked the $1 million because it's kind of a good number that we can use. But when we look ahead, I don't think it's something that when we look at our county financial situation that we're in at some point to say, well, you know what, we'll just build our way out of any county financial situation. When I don't see that being the case at all. You know, so I think we're strong now. The forecast is that we'll be strong into the future, but I think we can't rely on growth and say that's going to provide all the revenues we need from a county general fund standpoint to the near future. So there's a balance point there. We want to make sure that we're growing in the right way, that we remain competitive and remain a great place.
The growth naturally plateau anyhow. So the one question I have, Cathy, is so we have, especially with Cumberland County being where it is, it seems like we've had a vast increase in the number of projects that are qualifying as tax exempt, or some type of preferential assessment. So do we track that in any way to know how that stacks up against the land development trends? Is it the tax exemption? Is that a serious issue or going to be a serious issue?
I don't think so. I think that right now we're just seeing properties. I think in the one chart that I showed you, the new tax exemptions that went on board was new buildings that they were taxed and then they applied for exemption, kind of like the Penn State Hospital. I don't think we're going to see a lot of trend like that. If anything, we may start seeing exemptions changing to taxable, meaning that the school in Lemoyne, it just changed into a apartment building. I just changed the assessment. So we may see more of that, people going in and taking churches and turning them into a house. Those are things that I may see more than the exemptions.
One of the things we talked about in the past was the way the laws have changed. A lot of developers are able to come in and develop, say, a personal care facility, and they are allowed to declare it as a nonprofit, or the part of their business, a substantial part of their business, is nonprofit versus for-profit. And apparently the laws are getting much more lenient in that. So I remember a discussion years ago about, is this change in the law going to develop into sort of a tsunami of requests for exemption. So we're not seeing that.
I have not seen that. I mean, one personal care unit that's being built in Hampton Township right now. I wouldn't think that they would come in for an exemption appeal.
Okay.
Kathy,
So a lot of from church affiliated organizations.
yeah, Kathy, if I can just add to what you're saying, one of the things that Kathy does, and she and her staff do it very nicely, is every time there is an appeal for tax exemption, a copy of that appeal is served on both myself and on the solicitor, and we discuss them. So that if there was anything that, that we looked at that we thought was questionable, that we would then bring to the board for review.
But the 3 property valuation indicators, which one, if there is one, that you would say is the most critical?
In my opinion, I know the common level ratio is used, but in my opinion, I would look more towards the price related differential.
That's what
And I would also look at the coefficient of dispersion, because the coefficient is dispersion is we're adding 800 houses on a year, and we're keeping those assessments back to the 2010 reassessment. We're not chasing the sale, meaning that if it's sold for 600,000, we're not putting it onto the tax base at 600,000.
Right. Thanks.
Other questions?
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that concludes our discussion item. Thanks very much for the presentation. So if there's nothing more on that, we'll move on to this is item 5, other business. Not hearing anything, so we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Stand adjourned. Thank you.